Hi guys, it's me, James at Drayton, here with another Facebook live stream with some live training. Now tonight we're going to have a look at 𝗲𝘀𝗁𝗍. So I'm going to give you a bit of a refresh because there's a few things that have changed. There's a few more devices that make up the lineup, and there's been a few app changes. So I wanted to really do a practical demo. There's not going to be too much in the way of slides. It's going to be more going through an initial setup as an installer and then understanding at what point you need to hand it over to the customer, and then what the expectation is of the customer once you've handed it over. So that's really what tonight is all about. So to kick it off, I want to, if I just change camera and you can have a look at this this top down. Just to take you through, this is all stuff I'm sure you know, but the 𝗲𝘀𝗁𝗍 backplate, it uses the industry standard backplate. So the backplate that you would have got with an LP, and what really has become industry standard now is what you'll be using, what you'll be fitting to 𝗲𝘀𝗁𝗍, and that doesn't matter whether you're fitting it to a 𝗲𝘀𝗁𝗍 kit 1 for a single channel, a kit 2 for heating and hot water, or a kit 3 which gets you both heating or 2 heating zones and 1 hot water. It's the same industry standard backplate for all of them. All that changes is the wiring configuration on the terminals, and the thing that actually changes about the hub is for the single channel you get the single override button. And for the 2 channel and the 3 channel, you get 2 buttons, 1 for heating, 1 for hot water. On the 3 channel, the heating button actually fires both of the heating relays. So that's something to watch out for. And the whole purpose of this button is it's not a convenience button for the customer. It's very much there that if everything's gone wrong, we need to be able to drive heat into the property. We can press and hold the button, keep it down for about 3 seconds, and then you can see that it starts flashing like that. So that's now in override mode. Now there's no temperature control with that. That will eventually time out. So your heating's not going to be on forever by pressing that button, but it's not there to be used as a convenience button for the customer. Same with the hot water. If this was a 2 channel, exactly the same principle. You press and hold the button for up to 3 seconds, and then it will start flashing. But there is no temperature control here. So it's for heating. It's not observing the room stat, because the rule is if you've got a working room stat, why would you be overriding a working system? So it's really there for if all else fails, we need to fire the relay. It's also quite good for commissioning as well, because if you want to fire the relays and make sure that your boiler's firing or that your 2 ports are opening as they should, it's quite handy to be able to just fire that relay without going into the app. But just be mindful, if you do it on the 3 channel, you actually fire both of the heating relays. You can't discriminate between the 2. If you want to be able to choose to fire either relay or channel 1 or channel 3, you would need to do that in the app. So it's a useful feature, but it's one to just sort of manage the customer's expectations on as to what it does. Now, if this hub is squirreled away in a cupboard somewhere, then they're probably not going to be interacting with it anyway. But it's not a convenience button. It's very much for overriding. Now, what I want to show you next is I'm going to go through and actually do a full setup with you. So if I split my screen here, you should be able to see the 𝗲𝘀𝗁𝗍 app now. So I really want to show you what you're going to be doing as an installer, and at what point you hand it over to the customer, because we have made some changes to the app. Now you can see I'm logged in here to a system. It's actually the one that's running in the Birmingham NEC at the moment, because we are doing the CEF Live 23. So if you've got a few hours spare over the next couple of days, make your way down there. We are on the Schneider stand at it's stand 21 in the NEC at Birmingham. But what you'll be doing, so that this could well be your system at home that you're logged into. You've come to a customer's house. You need to set up a new system. So you'll use your phone. And again, this is where we want to make sure that we're getting the process right. So we're not asking the customer for their phone to set this up. We are going in and we're owning the process of setting this up. So you're going to drive it with your phone. Now, the fact that you're setting it up on your phone doesn't make any odds. It's, your phone is in no way tied to the installation because you're setting it up. It's just a vehicle for getting commands through to actually get in and configure. So once you've fitted the hub to the backplate and it's all wired, and maybe you've used your override button to check that the outputs are doing what they should, it's then onto the phone. You'll go into your account settings, so settings, then to account, and you'll hit log out, and that will then take you back out to this screen here, which is the Get Started screen. So you're going to then hit Get Started. And this is a recent change we've made with the app, is you've now got two clear journeys, whether you're a homeowner or a professional installer. Now, you'll remember on the old app, there was just one journey and you needed to remember where to skip, depending on whether you're fitting it as a homeowner or whether you're fitting it for a customer with the expectation that it's going to be handed over for them to complete registration. Well, now you pick it from the off. So you'll always pick professional installer, obviously, unless you're fitting it for yourself. But you'll pick a professional installer. It asks you to where your location is, because all that does is it influences what devices you see on the next screen. Now, remember, the Wiser Home app is shared by Wiser as well as the new Digistat. So if you're wanting to configure the new Digistat and get your customer using the Wiser Home app with their new Digistat over a Bluetooth connection, you would again follow this same route. Here, obviously, we're going to pick the hub R because that's what we're setting up. And it tells us to press the setup button. Now, this is where sometimes we get a bit of confusion. So you can see here, I mean, if I get this in shot, you can see that the setup light is a solid green light. And that's what it is. As soon as you power it up, it will go to solid green. You'll go through a boot up routine and then it will land on solid green. Now, what we want to be doing here at this stage where we're pressing the button is it's a quick press, quick click, and you can see that the green light is now flashing. Now, you don't want to be holding the setup button in, because if you do that, if you hold it in long enough, you'll factory reset it. Or if you hold it in for sort of 4 or 5 seconds, you will get green flashing, but you'll get this strange orange and green flashing. Now, why is this flashing important? Well, what the flashing means is that it is broadcasting an access point, which we are then going to connect to with the phone, because at the moment, the hub doesn't know anything. It's brand new out of the box. The phone can't connect to it until it starts broadcasting a network. And that's the whole point of this clicking of the setup button to get the access point broadcasting. Now, this is also a security measure, because it means that unless you physically go over and you press the setup button to get it broadcasting that access point, you can't just access the hub remotely. You've actually got to physically press the button, which rather means that you need to be within the property when you do it. Now, the access point that's being broadcast here is not massive. It's not like a wireless router, so you're not going to be able to go miles with it. So what I would say is, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that your phone is in reasonably close proximity to the hub so that you get the best user experience going through doing the setup. If you wander off, if you're connected to it and you wander off to the van and come back in, it's highly likely that your phone will have dropped the access point. Now, if it does that, it doesn't mean you have to go back to the beginning. It just means that you need to then go back into your settings and pick it up. And actually, that's something I can demo in a minute. So with that flashing, we then progress with the app. The app invites us to open our Wi-Fi settings. So it opens the settings on your phone. Now, I'm using an iPhone here, but it's exactly the same principle if you're using an Android. Now, you can see my current network that I'm connected to is SE Wi-Fi. That's the Wi-Fi network here. But what I'm looking for in my list of available access points is the one called Wiser. Now, you can see there's Wiser 42, and you've got the 6 digits there, 04B23A. Now, those are the unique MAC address for this hub. It's also written on the QR code, which is, you can just about see it in under the backplate there, but with the backplate removed, the last 6 digits are the MAC address, and that's the unique identifier for the hub. So it's always worth making a note of that when you're fitting Wiser, because if there's any sort of issues and you need to talk to our customer services, they will ask you for that MAC address. And as long as you've been able to give Wiser an internet connection, you'll be able to, or our customer services will be able to see the back end, and they'll be able to see what's going on. Also, by connecting it to Wi-Fi, even without registering it or doing anything else, by giving the hub an internet connection, it will then automatically do its updates, so that it will make sure you're on the latest revision of the firmware. So we pick the access point. The phone will then give us two warnings. The first is that it's an unsecured network, which it is because it joined without requiring a password. But it also tells you that there's no internet connection. Now you can see it's got the little blue tick next to it, which is the important thing. it's the reason it's flagging no internet connection is because it's not connected to a router, and the phones are predisposed to flag if they connect to a wireless network and there isn't any internet. They're predisposed to flag it. But there's no issue here. The fact that it's given us that warning message is not a problem, because we're connecting to the hub in order to be able to configure it, not to go on the internet. So as long as it's stabilized, you've got the tick there, we can then background our settings, go in to the Wiser Home app, and you see that the continue button then livens up. It was grayed out before, but the app has detected that connection and it's now able to allow you to progress on. So you hit continue, you get the confirmation that you've connected to the system, and you're then straight into making some configuration changes. Now, the first thing it asks you for is the fuel type. So here you can choose between a gas boiler, oil boiler, electric, and heat pump. Now, what we're actually choosing here by setting this fuel type, we're actually discerning which cycle rate we're using. So for gas, which is the default, it's 6 cycles per hour. So what that means is, dependent on demand, you can expect your boiler to fire once every 10 minutes. So 6 cycles in a 60-minute period, I should say. And the minimum on time for that would be 1 minute. The maximum would be obviously 10. And then when it gets to the end of that block of 10 minutes, it will then reevaluate what it needs to be, what the cycle rate needs to be for the next block. So that's how we drive some efficiency. If we go to oil, that just slows everything down. So rather than 6 cycles per hour, it goes to 3. So each burn period could be a maximum of 20 minutes, again with a minimum on time of 1 minute. But this is more suitable for an oil boiler. Oil boilers tend to take longer to sort of spool up, and so you don't really want to be cycling them. Electric is the polar opposite of that. Electric has got instant response. So by setting electric, you are choosing 12 cycles per hour. So that would be once every 5 minutes, assuming there is demand to support that. And we've now, it's been out for a while, but the latest addition is the option for a heat pump. Now, what that does is it turns off the cycling completely. So that's pretty much an on-off. So it's on until it hits set point, and then it's off. So if you were to choose heat pump and you had, say, a gas boiler installed, it will work, but it just means you'll get a much greater hysteresis with regards to your set point and ambient temperature. So you're not going to control to within half a degree if you've got it set up for, say, or if you've got a gas boiler installed and you choose heat pump, you're not going to harm anything other than your efficiency. That said, you may find if you're running a really old boiler that isn't designed to be modulated, then it may be worth choosing the heat pump setting, but that's going to be very much trial and error, because and the upshot or the downside of that will be that if you're running any other fuel type other than what you set here, you're going to harm your efficiency. But possibly might be if it might be better for an older boiler that's not expecting to be cycled. And obviously for a heat pump, because the whole control theory with a heat pump is we want to minimize the amount of stop starts of the compressor. So we pop it into heat pump. Now, generally when you're connecting to a heat pump, if there's a call for heat, that doesn't necessarily mean that the compressor will run. What it certainly will do is it will run the pump, and it will circulate the water through the condenser of the heat pump, but it doesn't necessarily translate into a compressor run. That will be decided by the heat pump. So all we're really doing in heat pump mode is telling the compressor, or telling the heat pump that there is demand. That doesn't necessarily mean that the compressor is running. So it doesn't really matter what we're doing here. So we may as well leave it in heat pump mode. And the very next one is let's connect to your Wi-Fi. Now, you don't have to. So if this is a new build, there's no requirement for you to connect to the Wi-Fi. It's a nice thing to be able to do. It's a nice thing to do if you can, because it means that Wiser will be able to see the cloud. Whilst you're not registered, the fact that you're giving Wiser an internet connection, it's able to then go through and do the latest updates. Now, you may find if you carry van stock and you've had it in there for, say, a year, 18 months, something like that, you may find that the current revision of firmware that it's running may not be supported by the latest revision of the app. It's highly likely that the app on your phone will automatically update, but if you're carrying old stock of Wiser, it could be that you get an imbalance where the latest app doesn't support the old firmware that's on the hub. Now, what you would do for that is you would get to this stage, you would connect it to the Wi-Fi, you'd allow it to then download the latest version of the firmware, and then you're able to progress on. Now, what I mean by an imbalance is it may be that you won't be able to see things. So if you've got a really old version of the hub and you want to add the WISER underfloor heating controller or the electrical heat switch, it's highly likely you might not see it. So in that case, you would get to this page, you click next, and you would go through and you would connect up your Wi-Fi. If it's new build, which is the scenario that I'm going to run here, there is no Wi-Fi, so we will hit the skip. Now, in doing so, it gives you a warning to say, if you do this, you're not going to be able to have remote access or complete registration. But that's fair enough, because that's very much in the homeowner's domain. So we acknowledge that, and then we move on to the setting up devices. Now, if we skip this stage, it will just take us into a blank app with nothing there. So if you do inadvertently hit next, it's not the end of the world. You just have to go back into the to the adding devices page. But obviously we will hit next, and we're then at this page here. So you're going to add as many devices as you want to add. Now, if it's a thermostat kit, then you're just going to add the room's thermostat. So I'll do that now. I'll just grab some batteries to go into there. So here is our new thermostat with its batteries and its table stand. So the principle here is that the app tells the hub what to expect to see, and it also gives you the instructions on what you need to do. So tell it to expect to see a room thermostat. Now, that's telling us to put the batteries in. So there's no particular hurry here, because the app will time out eventually, but it hunts for about a minute, which is enough time for you to be able to put the batteries in, put the battery covers on, otherwise your batteries will pop out, and your room stat will go into join mode. You can just see the little Wi-Fi symbol there, and then you've now got a temperature. That's been confirmed on the phone. You can see it on the app. So what we need to do now is we need to address it, because it needs to know where it's controlling. So if it's just a thermostat kit that you're fitting, and you're just replacing a standard, a single thermostat in somebody's hallway, you call it hallway, and it then takes you back to the landing page. So you'll come back to this landing page for as many devices as you're going to add. Now, remember, you can have up to 16 room thermostats. You can have 32 radiator thermostats, 3 underfloor heating controllers, 16 electrical heat switches, and 10 WISER plugs. So that's the capability of the system. Now, but the overarching limit on that is 16 zones. So you can view zones as rooms. So, kitchen, bedroom, that sort of thing. You could go through and define your rooms, and then within those rooms, so I've just created a room called hallway, but it doesn't just have to have a room stat in it. It could have up to 4 radiator thermostats. It could be that it's a zone of underfloor heating, in which case you would be adding a room stat, and you would be assigning it to the underfloor heating controller, or it could be an electrical heat switch or a smart plug. But that's your limits. 16 room stats, because having 1 room stat per zone doesn't make any sense, or more than 1 room stat per zone doesn't make any sense. Radiator thermostats, it does, because you may get rooms that's got multiple radiators. And remember, you're not controlling the individual radiator, you're controlling the zone. So if you've got 2 radiators, they would both sit in a room called lounge, and then they will work out how to bring the temperature of that room up in a uniform manner to whatever your set point is with respect to your ambient. Now, while we're on the topic of that, and you can see the other options there for the electrical heat switch and the underfloor heating controller, I just want to answer some questions that we've been getting about the underfloor heating controller. So this is it. And you can have up to 3 of these on your system. So if you want to have a WISER system that's completely maxed out with underfloor heating, you can do. You can do all of your 16 zones with 3 of these. More typically, what you will find is you will have a mixed system, which will be one of these, and this will be normally doing the ground floor. People tend to not take the underfloor heating pipe work up to the second, first or second floors. So it may be that it'll be a radiator circuit up there, and then you'll have this doing your multi-loop wet underfloor heating downstairs. So if I pop the cover off, you can have a look at the terminations. And if I bring this in, you can have a proper good look at what we've got here. So the first thing is this is the antenna point. So this has got an external antenna that screws on there, and it's on about a meter long lead, and then you can stick that to the optimum point where you would want to. Now we get a lot of questions about these first two terminals here. Now this is where your sensors go in. So the first one is a limit sensor. So the first two terminals go out to a floor sensor if you want to limit the temperature. If you've got, say, sensitive floor coverings, solid oak or something, and you want to make sure that they don't over or underheat, you can put your limit stat on those two. The next one is a dew sensor. Now this is if you're using it in cooling mode and you want to prevent condensation on your forming on your underfloor heating manifold. You would connect that into there. Typically in the UK, we're not using cooling mode, and that's really what the next contact's for. So if you put 230 volts potential between C1 and C2, you will then throw the unit into cooling mode, and that really just sort of flips the control theory, whereby in heating mode, if your set point is above your ambient temperature, that is a core for heat, whereas a set point below your ambient temperature would be a core for cool. So particularly useful if you're running heat pumps, but if you are, you need to be mindful that you can't just run cold water around a traditional radiator circuit, otherwise you'd have no end of condensation issues. So you would need to have the proper emitters that are able to heat as well as cool. And then we come on to the banks of our thermal actuators. So this is where you're going to be wiring things like the Drayton TS Ultra, but it doesn't have to be ours. The requirement is that they are 230 volts. So all of these outputs here, the live side, you can sort of trace the little wiring diagram there. So all the live terminals, which are the ones on the right hand side, so it goes neutral live, neutral live, neutral live, neutral live. All of the lives are at 230 potential. And the rest of them are on the left are your neutrals. So this will allow you to control 4 thermal actuators with one room thermostat. So each one of these could potentially have a WISER room stat assigned to it, and that will then fire that many loops. So if you've got multi-loop, you've got to keep you can't just have, typically if you've got a big room, you can't just have a massive long run of pipework, because you will have too much loss over its length. So it may be that even though you're controlling the one room, particularly if it's open plan, you need to have more than one loop. So you're then into multi-loop, but they would all be controlled by their own thermal actuator, and this would all tie back to the room stat that will be controlling it. So you've got 2 banks of 4, 2 banks of 2, and two singles there. But if you just want to run a single on, say, terminal or on bank 1 or bank 2, you absolutely can. So you can wire this up however you want. We then come on to the pump connection. Now, this is an important one, and we get a lot of questions about this, because the pump connection here is actually volt-free. Now, I don't know if you're going to be able to see the traces under there, if I can get this in and it focuses. But you can see that N1 is linked directly to N2. You've got L1 is linked to L2, but with a switch in line. And then the 2 center terminals are your earths. But the important thing is that unless you bring some voltage onto L1, nothing is going to go out on L2. So your N2 and L2, that's going to be the output to your pump. You've got the earth rail in the middle there to maintain earth continuity, because obviously your pumps are metal case, they're always going to require earthing. But you then need to bring a supply in onto N1 and L1. So that would be a supply in of an appropriate size cable fused at whatever the requirements are for your pump. So you can't just connect the output to the pump, you need to bring a supply in as well. Otherwise, if you don't bring anything in, you won't get anything out. Now, the next 2 terminals, B1 and B2, this is your interlock. So this is basically saying if any one of these room stats here, or if any one of these zones calls for heat, as well as energizing the thermal actuators, we're also going to close a contact here. Now that typically will go out and fire a zone valve. So you'll have a 2-port on the incoming to your manifold, and you'll connect your B1. Again, it's volt free, so you would bring a live supply into B1, and then B2 would go out to typically the brown wire of your 2-port valve, to open it when there is demand on any one of these. Now, these have also got pump over them, so if any one of these rooms, or when the last room stack stops calling for heat and there is no more call for underfloor heating, the interlock will drop, so that will stop the boiler firing and producing hot water, but your pump will carry on running to evacuate the water around the system, evacuate the heat from the water around the system. And then the last 2 terminals, this is your mains in, this is your supply, and these are just 2 repeated terminals. So if you want to liven up your interlock, you can put a loop from L3 onto B1. That would liven up one side of the switch on B1, and then B2 would go out to do your zone valve. Or if you're not using the interlock, you could use that for your pump live, but it's not earth, so you would need to make sure that you're maintaining earth continuity for your pump. You've also got onboard protection here, and if all of these zones would call for heat all at once, the banks are actually managed. So rather than suddenly there being loads of load because you've suddenly required, say, 14 thermal actuators to all energize at once, it will be staggered. So it will energize bank 1. These will be pending, and you'll see the green light is that shows you that there's a call for heat will be fainter. It won't be as bright, dimmer, you might say. And then once 30 seconds has elapsed, the next bank would fire, and then another 30 seconds, and the next bank. So there is some load management on there to make sure that you're not going to essentially blow this fuse by drawing too much current from your thermal actuators, which typically tend to be wax motors. They tend to have little heaters in there that warm up the wax to expand the wax to open the valve. So that's the 𝗿𝗀𝘁𝗀𝗲 underfloor heating controller, and like I say, you can have up to 3 of them. Your cover snaps back on, and you've then got your zones that you can write what they are. That's actually the wrong way around. It should sit like that, because bank 1 and 2 are the 4s, and then you've got the 2 2s and the 2 1s. So 14 thermal actuators per underfloor heating controller, and a maximum of 3 of these per 1 𝗿𝗀𝘁𝗲 hub. And for every one of your zones, you're going to have a 𝗿𝗀𝘁𝗲 room thermostat. Now, when you add it, once you've added this, the sort of order of operations here is, if you're fitting underfloor heating, you will add this device first. So you can see here on the right-hand side, if we were to pick the underfloor heating controller, it's then going to go through the joining process. You would do that before you add anything else, because once one of these is seen on the system, when you then subsequently add a room stat, you then get the option of whether it's pointing at the radiator circuit, which would be the relay in here if you pick radiator, or it will give you the option to pick from one of the channels on the underfloor heating controller. And it's pretty much the same principle with the electrical heat switch. So this is for controlling heating loads up to 16 amps. It works with a 𝗿𝗁𝘁𝗀𝗲 room stat. So this on its own, whilst you can add it to the system, if you don't assign a room stat to the same zone, it doesn't do anything. You can view it as being an inline switch. And if I grab a quick screwdriver, I'll pop the cover off so you can see what it looks like inside. But this sits between your supply, which will typically be a fuse spur, and the load. So look inside here. This is your terminal rail, so essentially in and out. And you've got from the left to the right, you've got your live load, so that will be the output. You've got your live in, which is your supply. The FP is a pilot wire. We don't use that in the UK, so you're never going to connect to that. So you can just ignore the FP. You've then got your 2 terminals for earth continuity, maintaining earth continuity. You can also see that the 2 neutrals are bussed together. So this is a single pole, single throw switch. We're not switching the neutrals, it's only switching the lives. And then you've got a sensor connection. So if you want to use this to control electric underfloor heating, it's mandatory that you use the floor sensor to make sure that the floor doesn't overheat and cause any injury, but sits in line between the load and the supply and the load. So that's really the devices. And once you've finished adding the devices, you'll then hit the done button. This will take you in to the 𝗿𝗁𝘁𝗲𝗀 home screen. And you can see here, the only thing that we've added is the room stat, but we can go through and we can boost it. So we're checking the operation again. We're still doing this on our phone. If we double check our settings, you can see that on the Wi-Fi, we are still connected to this access point called 𝗿𝗲𝗀, and the green light is still flashing on the hub. So our method of connection is direct between the phone and the hub. So we can go in and we can make sure that it's all doing what it should, that we can boost, that it fires the relay, and then we can kill the core for heat and check that it's doing absolutely what it should be. If you go into your devices page, it will then show you that it's there. We've got a little red triangle against the hub because it's telling us that we haven't configured our Wi-Fi, and that's true, we haven't. We skipped it. So when you're in installer mode, the fact that you see a red triangle doesn't make any odds whatsoever. If the customer goes back in once they've completed registration and sees that, then we've got a potential issue that we might need to speak to our customer services about. But that's really it. Once you get to this stage, you're then ready to hand it over to the customer. So what you're going to do is you're going to go into your settings in the top right. You're going to go to just double check that everything is where it should be. Once you're there, force close the app. So if you're on an iPhone, just press and scroll up and then flick up. And then when you relaunch the 𝗿𝗲𝗀 app, you're taken back to the Get Started or the login screen. If you want to log back into your system at home, you can do if you've got 𝗿𝗲𝗀, or if you're off to the next job, you're on to Get Started and you restart the professional journey. Now, in terms of the homeowner, we now get them to download the 𝗿𝗲𝗀 Home on their phone, and they then follow the homeowner journey where they're going through creating an account. As an installer, you want to steer well away from doing that. You want to be handing it over to the customer because it's going to be using their email address. It's going to send them a click through on an email to make sure the email address is valid. So it's very much something that you want to be handing over to the customer. Certainly hold their hand, don't just hand it over and be out the door. You can walk them through it, but they need to be driving and owning this process because it's really dealing with their personal details, and you don't want to be getting involved with stuff like GDPR. So once you've got it to a stage where all of the in-home devices are working, it's then time to hand it over to the customer and get them to complete registration. Now, I'm going to give you a heads up that this, if you've got any questions, because we're probably into the last couple of minutes of this broadcast. Last thing I'm going to show you, let me bring this out of sharing. Just pop that off so that you got just the. I just want to give you some details on the 9 Degree Network. So hopefully by now you're all members of the 9 Degree Network, and it's sort of when you log in. You've got the Academy, where there's lots of training modules on there, and these are actually being refreshed as we speak. So there's going to be some new ones going up. The motorized valve one is the newest of them all, and there's lots of stuff on there about fault finding and bench testing to make sure you can check to see if they're doing what they should. There's going to be more stuff going up. There's going to be some wiring of control packs and also fault finding. So that's really the Academy. So look out for the new. There's going to be some new 𝗿𝗲𝗀 refresh modules as well that are going up. And have a look. The priority shop is open. So if there's anything you need, in particular things like bodies only, so auto balancing bodies on their own, the remote floor temperature sensor that I talked about, if you're using the 𝗿𝗲𝗀 electrical heat switch for your underfloor heating, you need to have one of these. That's also the same remote sensor that you would use on the underfloor heating controller as well. So you if you wanted to protect, say, a sensitive floor covering, you could connect that on the first 2 terminals of the underfloor heating controller. You can buy the underfloor heating controller there. You can also buy, I think there's some deals on the packs. So 𝗿𝗲𝗀 multi-zone kit 2, 40% off. You are limited to the quantity that you can buy because we're not here to compete with the merchants. We are just here to give you a bit of a try before you buy, and if you don't really know what 𝗿𝗲𝗀 is all about, you can get hold of it with a good discount. Right, this is going to be the last 30 seconds. I don't see any questions as it stands at the moment. What I would say is, let me bring me back into the room. If you are interested in doing some more training, there are going to be some live virtual webinars that we're going to be doing. Now, they're starting next week. So if you go to Eventbrite and search for 𝗿𝗲 virtual training, you'll be able to sign up to it. So there's going to be a maximum of 9 people per session. So it's going to be a group session. It'll be quite good because hopefully we can get some conversation going, and as well as me showing you like the intricate way of setting up, really more of what I've shown you tonight, but I'll also take you through the customer journey, and we'll talk about things like how to upsell to your customer. But it's a good opportunity to get involved with other installers who and get their view, and also iron out if there's any issues that you've got. We can go through it, and it's really an opportunity for you to sort of engage and see a live demo, and also ask questions if there's little niggles, things that you're not quite sure of, or issues you've had while you don't like using 𝗿𝗲. It's a really good forum. So I would urge you to join that. There's 9 per session. I think we're doing next week. It kicks off. I think there are 3 sessions available. It's free, so it's not going to cost you anything, and they are going to run at 7 p.m. So I believe it to be Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. But get yourself over to the Eventbrite website, search 𝗿𝗲 virtual training, and you'll be able to sign up, and it'll be a good thing. It will last. I think it will last for roughly 90 minutes, but I guess that will depend on how much engagement there are. But really, what I want to do is make sure that you go away confident to fit 𝗿𝗲, and if you've got any issues and anything you want to address, we do it on that session. Right, I don't see any questions that have come in while I'm live. This will obviously go up onto YouTube, and it will also be available on Facebook, so you can watch it again. And it is monitored, so if there's anything that you've seen about this, or indeed anything that I've done in the past, just stick it on a comment on any one of our videos, and we will follow up on it. Thanks for joining me tonight, guys, and keep an eye out for the next one, which I guess will be in roughly 4 weeks' time. We've also got the installer show coming up. So again, at the Birmingham NEC, which is where CEF Live is at the moment, CEF Live 23, that's at the NEC. At the end of the month, we've got the installer show. So we're going to have our stand there. So do come and see us. I'm going to be doing some stuff, and you never know, if you want to get in front of the camera and do a little interview, you can have a little chat with me, and you'll become a star on our Facebook and socials. So it'd be great to see you there. Thanks for joining me tonight, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, guys. Catch you soon.